What happens if perfectly healthy people accidentally end up in a mental hospital? Will they be able to convince the hospital staff that they are not crazy? This question was asked by psychologist David Rosenhan in 1973. The results of the experiment shocked everyone, including the author of the experiment. Rosenhan and 7 of his colleagues, resorting to a little lie, tried to break into various psychiatric hospitals in the United States. These were not random people. 3 psychologists, a pediatrician, a psychiatrist, an artist and a housewife. In order to avoid recognition, they forged their names and jobs, but that's all. Otherwise they kept their biography intact. Using the example of a psychiatrist, pseudo-patients claimed to hear voices that seemed to pronounce the words empty, hollow, and knocking. These words were not chosen by chance. They could talk about the manifestation of a crisis, but not psychosis. The pseudo-patients did not complain about anything else. Having achieved their goal, getting into 12 different hospitals in the United States, including in rural areas, the patients behaved as usual, without feigning or imitating anything. In records after the experiment, the staff called them friendly and helpful. 11 pseudo-patients were diagnosed with schizophrenia and 1 with manic depressive psychosis. Interestingly, none of the staff, including doctors, doubted that they were mentally ill people. But there were also those who discovered decoy docs. These were real patients who repeatedly claimed that they were people who were just doing research. In the conditions of the experiment, it was prescribed that the participants try to get out of the hospital on their own. Although in case of force majeure they, of course, had a lawyer's phone number. The patients were stuffed with drugs that they flushed down the toilet, just like real patients did. Rosenhan and his colleagues admitted that in the hospital they could not get rid of the feeling of longing that gnawed at them and the loss of themselves. The staff could search their personal belongings at any time, treated patients as if they were things, and easily discussed them in their presence. None of their words were taken seriously, any of their actions were seen as symptoms. For example, when one of the patients took notes, the nurse called it graphomania, in a pathological sense. Rosenhan did not plan to spend much time in the hospital, but the circumstances were different. I said to my friends and family, I can get out when I can, that's all. I'll stay there for a couple of days and get out. Nobody knew that I would spend 2 months there. The only way to get out of the hospital was to admit that the psychiatrists were right. They convinced me that I was crazy. I'm crazy, but I'm better already. Only this statement helped me get out. Based on his results, Rosenhan concluded, the evidence suggests a huge role for stigma in psychiatric diagnosis. There is nothing a pseudo-patient once labeled schizophrenic can do to overcome this stigma. The stigma profoundly colors others' impressions of him and his behavior. Rosenhan published the results of his research in the journal Science, where he suggested that psychiatrists are not able to distinguish a sick person from a healthy one. But not all colleagues supported this conclusion. Seymour S. Keedy put it this way: if I drink a pint of blood and hide it and end up in the hospital with bloody vomiting, the behavior of the staff will be quite predictable. And if they treat me for a stomach ulcer, it's hardly fair to say that the medical community has failed to make a correct diagnosis. In subsequent years, several more similar experiments were carried out, and the results were very similar. Whether the criticism of Rosenhan's experiment is fair or not, the fact remains that doctors have failed to separate sick people from healthy people. That's all, friends. Thank you for watching. See you again. By the way, don't subscribe to the channel. Sue.